Welcome back to Ty and That Guy. I'm Wes Chatham. This is my good pal Ty Franck, and this is our good pal Breck Eisner that has joined us again for the second time. Lucky to have him.
Here.
Hey, everybody.
Hello, Wes.
I think this demonstrates that Breck does not have enough to do. He's clearly not working on a movie. He's clearly not working on another TV show. He's just hanging out at his house, begging people to go on their podcast.
Can I please do another podcast?
I could just picture Breck, like when I text him, "Hey man, we're gonna do this thing. You want to come?" He's like, "Oh god damn it! Oh, I got 3 kids. I got all this shit going on, and I got to go do this damn podcast for Wes."
It is my wife's birthday today, and we do have a dinner tonight, but that's okay.
Well, this isn't going to be a long one because this is a special. And Ty, do you want to tell everybody, tell all the boys and girls that are listening to this what this one's going to be about?
Wes and I, we mentioned before on this that the reason we do this is because he and I just want to talk about movies and genre stuff and books all the time. So one of the things that Wes and I were texting and emailing to each other for, I don't know, years before we started doing this was cool short movies that we found.
Besides dick pics.
Yeah, besides dick pics. Was the cool short movies we found on YouTube. So I'd email him. I'd be like, dude, check this out. It'd be some like little 5-minute short movie. And then, yes.
Dude, check this out.
Well, no.
Are you playing on the short film? The short film?
Check out how short
this film is the other term for dick pic. Yes.
Check out this short film I got.
Man, and now Breck is dick shaming us. Can you believe that? Breck. That is the lowest of the low, man.
I do remember one night, Ty. I was in Toronto and you sent me this. You sent me this short and you're like, this was kind of fucked up. And it was the one where like the guy's in it's like a thing in a wheelchair and it's like, and it's just like, it's like all this distorted faces and shit and it like happens for like 30 minutes.
Yep.
That means it happens for like a minute. And it fucking fucked me up a little bit. I was like, what is this shit?
Yeah, that one
right
isn't even a horror thing. It's just somebody had a video on YouTube, just said the strangest video on YouTube. And it's seriously strange. It's seriously fucked up. So I sent that to Wes, and Wes is like, what is this?
Yeah, it's not something I wanted to see right before bed.
No, it's seriously disturbing because nothing happens in it. There's no like plot. It's just a bunch of really weird shit.
Well, I want to see it now. What's it called?
We'll watch it later, but we gotta power through this.
I'm gonna put it on the background while we talk.
Yeah,
we're gonna have Joseph splice in some of these things. Not enough to get us in trouble for copyright infringement, but we'll splice in a little bits of these things when he puts out the edited version.
One of the reasons I wanted to have Breck on for this one, not only is he a huge horror fan, but he told me about his film school project that he did. And we've all seen so many film movies, like that are college films and thesis films and everything like that. And his movie's Recon, I was like, Jesus Christ, it looks like Blade Runner, the opening. Like, it's like helicopters and like New LA and then fucking Charles Durning. I'm like, is that Charles Durning in his student film? Are you fucking kidding me? How did he get Charles Durning? And I knew, you told me the story about Peter Gabriel, and I'm like, that makes sense. Peter Gabriel's a musician, and he's like, yeah, sure.
Right.
But Charles Durning, like, and this was in 96 too. I mean, and Charles Durning is like one of the most beloved. Also, Elizabeth Pena was in that.
Yeah,
and I've always loved Pena. Yeah, I've always loved her.
She's great.
And I was like, Jesus Christ, Breck. And you got fucking helicopters and like, and so the short film's called Recon, and you can YouTube it.
Yep.
And just YouTube Breck Eisner and Recon. But Ty, you just watched it. What do you think about it?
It's the classic short horror film that you find on YouTube. It's got an idea that would fit in a Twilight Zone episode, where it's like the surprise moment comes out of the idea you're exploring. I will say, those actors were struggling to get some of that student film level dialogue out.
I would agree. I would concur. This is 1994.
Yep.
I would agree.
And if I had written the dialogue in 1994, mine would be 10 times worse. So I'm not bashing anyone involved. But I mean, it's got a little bit of that student film roughness to it. But the idea is like, as it was happening before the big reveal, like this thing clicked in my brain, like, oh, I know what the reveal is. But it was like 5 seconds before the reveal, so it wasn't like the whole movie, right? It was like I knew what it was going to be just before it actually happened, which is actually good. That means you did a nice job with the setup, and the reveal isn't too obvious. And I will say the creepiest thing in there was the faceless people, because the justification being she never actually saw their faces, so her memory doesn't include that information. So you have these faceless people doing stuff. That was super creepy. Yeah.
My buddy Ed played the faceless guy. We had no money and no time. Even though they're helicopters, they're like 90s bad CG helicopters is what they are.
You stole them from Tron.
But who actually shot it was Danny Mindell, who has become big time DP. But he was a commercial DP at the time. So my buddy Ed played the faceless guy, and obviously the faceless guy. Well, I won't give away the ending, but so we had this like prosthetic where it was just rubber mask of no face and a little hole just so he could breathe out his mouth. And when we'd roll, we'd cover the mouth. Hold your breath, cover the mouth because there was no oxygen, and he'd do his thing. And a lot of it was running, so he'd be running, and then he'd get so tired, and we'd open up the hole. And so as the day went on, the rubber mask got sweatier and sweatier, but we only had it for one day, and we couldn't afford to redo it. So every time he'd breathe, the whole mask would go, and then come back in. And so I'm like, Ed, now you got to run, but you also, not only can you not see, there were no eye holes. So he was running completely blind, and we'd say, Ed, keep running straight. You're not going to run into anything. You're fine. Just run. So imagine closing your eyes and running, and then you say, hold your breath, Ed. So now he's holding his breath, blind, running, and every time he breathes, the whole thing goes out. You can't break the prosthetic. And so we shot overnight. We were on the subway, and I'm sitting there. We're doing another scene, and Ed has the mask with a hole and a straw coming out of it so he could just barely breathe. And I look over, and I see his head go like that. I'm like, oh my God,
passed
Ed's
out?
dead. Quick, but don't take his face off because we can't rebuild it. Just make sure he's not dead. So, Ed, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. The face. I owe Ed.
I'm going to ask you a question because I know how important your work is to you, and I know how much that you care about it. If Ed would have died, would you have Weekend at Bernie's him through the rest of the film before you called the ambulance? Would you have finished your film before you called the ambulance? Tell me the truth. And did he actually die? Is Ed like our fake name?
Ed is still around. I still love Ed. He's still around. It's a tough question about the Weekend Bernie's. I don't know. I don't know if he'd be able to run if he was dead. Have to get another friend to put on the face. Hey, take Ed's face, put it on.
No,
He's sweaty. It's okay.
I know for a fact what Breck would have done. He would have just shot all the rest of the scenes from behind. Because I've seen him do that. I've seen Breck do that on set where he's like, "This actor is terrible, therefore I only shoot him from behind now." So,
Ed, why are you running like that? Why you don't look like a normal person running? He's like, "I'm blind. I'm running blind. That's why I'm running like this."
I know that tone too. I know that tone when Breck doesn't like something in a thing. He's got this disdain and just disgust in his voice. Why are you running like that? And also when he gets focused on like getting a shot or getting something done, I mean that's dead focus. And I've told the story a million times when I'm hanging in the rafters. But that did thought cross my mind. Like, if I died up here in the rafters, hanging upside down with this thing on, because Breck has forgotten about me because he's focused on something else. If I died up here, would Breck call it a day? Or would he be like, just put him to the side and
we have a stand-in for you. We have a stand-in.
Just bring his stand-in in and everything. Look, he's dead. It's not like, he's going to be the same dead when we wrap. We'll call the ambulance when we wrap.
He's going to be the same dead.
So
how did you get Charles Durning in this?
Once we got Peter, and I got Peter Gabriel through a friend who was at film school at the time, who we were in film school. He was producing the movie, and his short got nominated for an Academy Award. He was on a panel with Peter Gabriel. And I said, "Hey, we want to do a student act. Have you ever thought about acting?" So that's how we got Peter. Once we got Peter Gabriel, any actor wanted to was like interested at work. So it was just about calling around, saying, "Hey, Peter Gabriel's doing the movie." And Elizabeth Haney was like, "Yes, I will do that." and then Charles Durning. I think she knew Charles Durning. She called Charles.
Now, when you do these,
and both have
when you
since
do
passed,
these student films,
sadly.
did you have to pay them? Do you have to pay them scale or anything, or it was all just free?
No, free. No one got paid. They have a, as long as it's under a certain length and you're at. I was at USC Film, so you have to be at like actually a student film. Yeah, we didn't pay. Like, got the DP for free, the editor, the equipment. It was hard. 2 days.
Yeah, because 2 days, 2 days in that.
It was
Where
2 days.
it was downtown Los Angeles.
Downtown, yeah, which we called Rat Alley because like the alley was filled with rats. They were running fucking everywhere. It was terrifying. That could have been the horror film, Rat Alley.
One of the things that's impressive, because it was in 94, 96.
I think 94 we shot it. It took 2 years to do the visual effects on it.
So that was before. I mean, I guess it was after. I mean, obviously it was after Dreamcatcher, but that was before that whole like going into dreams and consciousness and mind. Like
way before
the Christopher Nolan movie, and all of those. So that's that was kind of a new thing at the time.
Well,
and obviously,
was it before Brainstorm?
No, I was influenced by Brainstorm. I loved Brainstorm. Now, Brainstorm was 80s, but it was before Stranger. What was the Catherine Bigelow movie?
Strange Days.
Strange
Days, yeah.
I think it was just before Strange Days because I remember that came out right after.
Because that was her second movie, as I recall. After what
was her first? I thought that was her first movie.
Near Dark was her first one.
Man, I love Brainstorm.
But it was after Dreamscape.
Doug Trumbull, right?
With Dennis Quaid. What's that?
It was. Wait, it was after which one, Wes? Dreamscape
with Dennis Quaid.
Yeah.
What year was that? I don't know.
Yeah, it was because that was
80s. Dreamscape was like 80s, right? 80s, right?
Yeah, 80s. Yeah. But that was the first time I saw that kind of psychic. I mean, I guess the Christopher.
But this was more about like using technology. It was like about the I wanted to bring together the intersection of technology and consciousness. You know, that it was clearly a technological piece, which was hilarious. Was we had this like briefcase that had the screen on it, but they didn't have LED screens at the time. So you'd open it up, and then we had this giant tube TV we'd stick in the thing, so it was like weighed like 1,000 pounds, and it was this big because it had to be synced to the camera. So it was like it had to be a big. There were no LED. It was so long ago there were no LED screens.
Was the story that Peter Gabriel was kind of driven insane with all this consciousness work that he was doing, and so it drove him to create one of the crimes that he was going to have to. Yeah.
Spoiler alert. Yes. Yeah. The idea was going in. The idea of it. The conceptually, I was interested in the idea that experiencing the murders, actually not just witnessing them, but becoming in part of it, changes your brain. So where the idea is it was supposed to be a passive piece of technology where you just look at it and you see it and then you are able to identify the killer. The problem was the fact that you're actually experiencing it, that it changes who he is. Yes, that was the idea. That was the bigger idea. If we'd ever written a feature of it, that's what it would have been. Should have done. Never did.
And that's one of the things I want to ask about each one of these short films we'll talk about. And because this is obviously, it has like Blade Runner, Manhunter, a little bit of Escape from New York, kind of like the helicopters and the things like that. If somebody was like, here, watch a short film, would this be something that you would be interested in a feature? And how would that work? Or do you feel like, that idea is kind of past and I don't think this would be worth
For me,
mining?
The idea is past. Yeah. I think like in the 90s, it was interesting. I think now, like it's been too tread.
Yeah, I think enough things have sort of mined this same ground at this point. On that note, we made Breck watch one of our favorite short films. It's one of the ones I sent to Wes early on, which I think is a good segue because a lot of the short horror films, and I love them, so I'm not bashing them, but a lot of short horror films sort of rely on the jump scare.
Yeah.
But I'm always impressed when I find somebody who can tell a story that doesn't rely on a jump scare in less than 10 minutes. So we made Breck watch one called Still Life, which early on is one that I watched. I immediately sent it to Wes. I'm like, you have to check this out. That is one of my favorites because it has a very simple premise, but it deals with the unreliable narrator in an interesting way. You know, your short film, in a way, our guy is an unreliable narrator because his brain is doing something even he's not aware of. And so the reveal is what his brain has been doing that he didn't know it was doing, right? And Still Life is very much like that because we begin with a guy, he's clearly very tired. He's drinking a bunch of coffee. He's popping pills to stay awake. We find him on a long drive. And you get this sense of a guy who's been driving a really long time. He's kind of losing it. He's taking these pills. He's drinking all this coffee, and then he arrives at a town, and immediately you have the creepy premise that every person he sees in town is a mannequin, and they're all frozen. But when he looks away and looks back, the mannequins have moved, but they only move when he's not looking. Which I thought when I first started watching it, I'm like, this is creepy as fuck, right? If that happened to you in real life, you would immediately shit your pants. And like anytime like I see something happen, because I'm very hardened against horror. Like I've seen so many horrors, but anything that would make
easy to shit your pants.
No, I'm the opposite. Like I need to find things that are scary enough to make me shit my pants. And this was, I'm like, oh my God, if that happened to me, I'd be like, all right, it's time to shit your pants because some seriously fucked up stuff is happening right now. But it builds up to, I think, one of the most powerful horror movie endings that I've ever seen in one of these short films. And I don't know if we want to spoil these or not, but Joseph will include a link to this movie in the description if you want to watch it. But
no, I think we should. I think we should spoil them because you want to talk about what made it, with that reveal and how to make it interesting. And then we'll say in the beginning, we'll put a disclaimer that we got spoilers that they should watch it before.
We should watch all of these movies before you listen to this.
Yeah, good call.
But Breck, you just watched it. It's fresh in your mind. What was your feeling on it?
I loved it. I mean, it's great. And I agree with everything you're saying about it. A couple of things that I really enjoyed about it. We watched a group of other shorts. And it's funny, how you watch a horror short is almost as important as what is in it. Like sitting in the day on your computer, which is how most people watch shorts. And they're dark and hard to see on your computer in a bright environment. And you end up seeing your own face reflected in it, which is, I always find it odd. Takes me out of it immediately. And it's hard enough in horror to do a short, kind of tell a story that's not just a jump scare in 3 to 8 minutes. But one of the things I loved about it is it was daylight. It was bright day. It was horror, not horror in the shadows and horror with the jump scares and horror, but it was horror in broad, bright snow everywhere. I mean, couldn't have been brighter daylight. And that's really hard to pull off. So I found it really satisfying and, again, creepy. Not just that they were the mannequins, but they were like fragile mannequins that would break, which sets up the ending that they're these kind of like made out of porcelain. I wouldn't say it was the super well directed. I think it was really well conceived and executed from a conceptual point of view. It was like some of the shorts that we've watched had better like technical execution, but it didn't matter. It didn't bother me. Like even the kind of the weird acting and the weird camera moves and the kind of some of the awkward moments didn't bother me because overall it really had a powerful concept. It's like it felt like the Twilight Zone. It sounded like the Twilight Zone.
And I will say that, because a lot of the things we're going to talk about, the ones that I really appreciate is when you only have 3 to 8 minutes to tell your story, so much of the storytelling has to be visual. You can't have people explaining the plot, right? There's just no time for that. And that's why I started watching a lot of shorts as a method of learning what I think is good storytelling and what I don't think is good storytelling. Because obviously, having gone into filmmaking now, I wanted to understand the sort of the theory of filmmaking. And I think short horror films for me were a great way to learn some of that stuff. So one of the things Still Life does is all of the setup for the twist ending is visual. Nobody ever explains anything. Yeah. Nobody ever talks about anything. It's just you see the visuals, you get this weird, unsettled sense of what's going on, and then when you get to the end and the twist ending happens and the payoff happens, everything you needed to know is in the visuals that you've had up to that point. Which early on, forgive me if I go on a little long here, but early on, Hawk Ostby, one of the pilot writers of our show, and was a EP in the early seasons of the show, we were talking about screenwriting, and he said one of the exercises he always does is try to figure out how he would write that screenplay. And it doesn't always work, but how would you write that screenplay if there was no dialogue? And do that as an exercise and figure out the way you would write it with no dialogue, and then go back and put the dialogue in. I think that only works sometimes, but I think it's a great exercise. And I think it leads to things like this short film, Still Life, because it is basically a screenplay with no dialogue. And learning how to write that way, I think, is a good exercise for wannabe screenwriters.
I think that's smart. I mean, this guy in the movie barely says anything. I think he says like hello or, I mean, he doesn't really, there's no dialogue, which is expositional or informational in any way.
What's really interesting is that there is there is sound. Like when he walks into the diner, you hear people eating, but when he looks, the sound
that's
stops.
True. Yeah, right.
You know, and you hear the sirens kind of going off in the background, and that really adds to it. It's creepy, and you kind of hear whispering or like voices, but you can't make it out. It's kind of off the thing.
And you're right. Whenever he looks directly at the thing, the sound stops. Yeah,
the sound stops. And this is the thing that I thought, and I agree with you, Breck. I think in some of the directing, but some of the him looking and then looking back were really done well with the mannequins, how they were situated and
Absolutely.
and their reaction and how they were approaching. I thought was really interesting. His walk in the house and how him going up the stairs and that whole sequence of that thing.
And hard to pull off. I mean, hard to actually, from a student film point of view, hard to pull off like the scale of these mannequins and having them move correctly and positioning it all, and it's a lot of planning and execution. It's well planned.
Yeah,
I
agree.
But we've done Twilight Zone episodes, and I think the same thing with these horror shorts is what happens to me with the Twilight Zone is that when it starts, I just know that all of reality is now gone. Right, that it's the anticipation that anything can happen is an automatic. It's suspense for me. And that really pulls me in. And so this is one of the ones that pays off in that way where you start seeing these mannequins and you're like, what the fuck? And he's hearing things and all this. And the reveal, I mean, to me, when he saw I don't think I was not ahead of this one. And the reveal when he saw the blood in the mirror and he looked at the bat and looked at the hands, and then you replay all the people all the mannequins that he broke and that he actually murdered him. And then the cops show up and they're real. When they show up. But now, I don't know if I'm remembering correctly, but did it ever zoom in on the pills that he was taking?
Not really. Not that I recall. It just, because he was taking them with the coffee, I assumed that they were some kind of like no-dose or something, but it could totally be wrong.
Me too. I assumed it was a caffeine supplement. I assumed the same.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing, Wes, he doesn't kill anyone until he gets into the house. That's actually kind of part of the fun of it.
No, he ran over. He ran over.
Oh, he hits the guy in the beginning.
Yeah, and that guy is like, that guy's dead. I mean,
that guy's not good. That guy's not good.
Not good. If the flashback, because when he broke them and then you see their bodies, like he shattered that guy.
Yeah.
In the car. But what I'm curious about, I think that's the right choice. I just want to make sure that they didn't zoom in at all on that bottle or anything, because I kind of like the not knowing, like, is this guy, like, is he escaping from something? Is he somebody that has this thing, or is it the caffeine? Is he up all night, or, there's a tension and mystery in that.
What I liked is exactly what you're saying about the Twilight Zone. I felt when I was first watching it, he drove into like the Twilight Zone. He was in a mysterious, weird town. And then there's that transition when you get to the house and he starts bashing the people. And that's when you realize, oh, wait, no, he's not in a town. Like the reveal's happening over the course of his attacking and getting to the bathroom. You're like, oh, wait, this guy's having a breakdown.
And I think a huge part of it, and you know this, Breck, we've had many conversations about this in editing, is it's about pace. That you can't linger so long that the audience gets ahead of the story. So you have to move through the story quickly enough that the audience is always kind of just behind you, just behind the reveals that you're doing.
Yeah.
And then it stays fresh and surprising, and you never kind of get lost in it. And pace, I think we should talk about pace a lot in these short films, because pace is the absolute key to these short horror films. That the pace, if it's too fast, you're confused. If it's too slow, you get bored, you start to drift off, or you get ahead of the story and you're waiting for the story to catch up to you. As a filmmaker, these successful short horror film filmmakers are masters of pace. Like just staying right on that edge, that razor edge of where the audience needs to be for the reveal to hit them. And, have spent time, around the editing of our show, and especially on set, like you were always yelling at people to go fast, like pace. We got to have pace. Stop slowing down. We got to get through this. And like, as a writer, like, hey, stop making people rush through the dialogue. But in the editing suite, you're like, oh yeah, we needed to move through this scene. We need, like, if this scene lags too long, the audience is ahead of it and they're impatient. Now they're waiting for us to catch up to them.
Yeah, and I think that's an important lesson for an actor, because sometimes actors want to take moments, they want to take dramatic pauses, they want to take things because that's pulling focus. That's you take a pause, that's more camera time you get. If you pause in between lines, that they got to. And also, you feel like you're doing something, you feel like the feeling of it is like, oh, I'm really doing something good here. I'm really doing something great because I'm taking my time with it. I'm feeling each thing, everything like that. But the reality is that a lot of times that could just slow everything down, and it can be really boring. And in life, we're not doing that. We're not taking those. We're just trying to achieve what we need to achieve in that moment. Yeah. If we're trying to get a point across, we're trying to get that. We're watching them to see if they're getting it, and then we go on to the next thing, and we're hammering things.
Yep.
And so, from an actor, you can see performance slowing a scene and pace down when it's becoming about the actor and less about that character in the scene trying to get what it wants from that moment.
It's a tricky balance to walk, because if you rush through too quickly, then you create confusion because the audience can't keep up with what's happening, and they're still behind the scene because they're trying to figure out what you just talked about.
What you can't say is rush it. Like, the problem is if you say just go fast, you have to have a motivation for why it's going quickly. I mean, you have to justify in the performance the pace of the dialogue and the overlap and the kind of intensity of it. I think so that helps with the comprehension of it.
So the reality is it's not tricky in the sense of like, well, you don't want to rush it because of this, or you don't want to slow it up because of this. There's just the truth or not the truth. And so usually like when a director says to an actor, like, pick up the pace, what they really are trying to say is like, you probably don't know specifically what you want yet.
Right.
Because if you can identify, instead of like pick up the pace or slow down the pace, say, what are you doing in the scene? What are you trying to achieve? Why are you talking to this person? And when they say that, what does that make you feel? And what do you feel like this person needs to know, or you need to explain, or whatever? And once that's clear, the pacing takes care of itself because it's in the natural rhythm of the conversation, the scene that's happening. Sure. The thing is people get caught up in, pace it up. And it's like, well, that's so artificial. Yeah. Like, I don't, it's like, if I just start talking like this because I want to make this, you're like, why are you talking so fast? But if I'm watching you and trying to land these points, then this really ties into the thing. So, I think that some of the I think that the notes of a scene is, why are you doing this? And why is this important to you? And if they don't know it, that's why the pace is off.
Yeah. But that's the virtuous circle of director and actor is the director is trying to find the right way to say those things, and the actor is trying to deliver the performance they think the director wants. And if it works well, if the communication is good, you get a virtuous circle. You get better things from both sides. When the communication isn't working well, and I have been on set with directors who have a hard time communicating what they want to their actors, and it's incredibly uncomfortable. The actors get very uncomfortable. They get very unsure of themselves. And the scenes suffer for it. So, if you can find a director who knows how to talk to actors, it's a huge bonus.
The other thing that is helpful in that is when the actors are actually listening. Because there's a certain point, if you're listening, there's a certain point when you know the intent of the line that precedes your line before the line finishes. So the pace can't just be like, finish line, close the gap, tight on top. It's almost like when we're having these naturalistic conversations and you click in on what I'm saying or what Ty or Wes is saying, you jump in at the point at which you've put it together, even if that other person hasn't quite finished speaking. There's this kind of artificial nature of script writing where one character line, character name, another line, but the way we really talk is this kind of messy, overlapping, jumping in when you know what that person means, anticipating maybe some of the words, and as opposed to waiting, okay, you done speaking? Now let me tell you my response. And I think that's the other way, and that just comes from listening. Like, if you're actually hearing what they're saying, when you get the intent, it's okay if you jump on a word or not. That doesn't matter, We have the audio separated. We can always deal with it that way.
Listening is a good point. If you know what you want, if you know what you're trying to accomplish in the scene, and you listen, then you don't worry about memorizing lines or any of that, because if you listen, sometimes you're triggered by the second to the last thing they say.
Right.
So they say something and you want to comment to that, but they got one more thing to say. Right. So you're jumping on, right on it, and you're like, no, that's not the point, whatever. And then you're going in, and that's kind of like the pacing, if they don't know what they want or they're not listening, that's the thing.
do we know what short we're doing next? Because this is leading me to something that I wanted to talk about, again, without dialogue. So are we doing whatever order we want, or do we have an order we're doing the shorts in?
We can do whatever order we want, but one question that I'm interested in before we move on to Still Life, because the Still Life is my favorite of these things. But I always, when I watch these, I always think about them afterwards, and I think about, could this be just for fun or experience in storytelling? Because some of these short horrors are kind of like a magic trick. You know, it has a beginning, middle, and end, a setup, and a payoff, and that encapsulates the whole idea. And once that idea is revealed, it's off. Does something like the Still Life have legs to be something more? And just off the top of your head, like brainstorming some of the ideas that could come for it, or do you feel like it solves itself with the reveal and there isn't really?
Is pretty close to the perfect length for the story it's telling. I don't think there's anywhere else to go with it. Once the reveal happens, it's over, right?
It's like a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah.
When they made Twilight Zone the movie, it wasn't one long episode. It was 5 same length episodes,
right.
I think. The thing I liked about like the Still Life on that note, in contrast to the others, is it felt like a fully baked story. It didn't feel like a scene or an exercise in fear, as opposed to like, I'm going to show you tricks for a jump scare. It felt like there was a character, there was a world, there was a journey he went on, and like it was more than just what I saw and more than just being scared. It had a lot of contextual stuff going on and a lot of like it's fun to think about. Whereas the other ones, the minute they're over, they're over. Yeah. I mean, it was
you're a fan of it. The one thing I do think the Still Life could have done better, and if I would have like tinkered with it, is the whole beginning sequence of him driving, taking the coffee, taking the pills. There could have been so many things planted within that moment that first makes that drive more interesting, and in the reveal ties all the way back to hit that drive that he had. You can learn more about him personally through, visual things. Sure. And also kind of what he's going on. And so that was the one thing I think, like watching it, that first drive, there was a lot of time without any kind of anything interesting happening in that drive.
Yeah, the execution of that drive was left a little to be desired.
Yeah.
The filmic execution. Right. But I agree with that note.
So the next short that I want to talk about is one of the very first ones I ever saw, and it remains one of my favorites for specific reasons. But it has one of the problems that most short horror films have. So I'm going to talk about all that. But the thing that ties it into Still Life for me is it is a story told without dialogue. It's a story told in its visuals, and it is incredibly compact. I think it's like something like a minute and a half or 2 minutes long, which is an amazingly short amount of time to tell a complete story in, right? But it's the one called Bedmates, where it starts out with a couple sleeping in bed. It's clearly late at night. It's 2 people under the covers. By the way, I've been saying the title wrong. It's actually Bedfellows. Joseph will have a link to it in the description, so you can go to the right video. But there's multiple things about this video that set up my understanding of how short horror films work, because this is one of the very first ones I saw. What I loved about it was the way it told the whole story visually in a single pan across the room. It's 2 people sleeping in a room. It pans across. There's a picture of a husband and wife smiling. There's a picture of a clock showing what time it is. There's a phone sitting on an end table. And so we know our brains tell us, oh, this is a husband and wife sleeping together in their room late at night. And then the phone rings and she's trying to get to the phone. And then it goes to the voicemail. And it's the husband saying, hey, honey, sorry I'm late. I'll be home soon. And the horror moment is, holy shit, who's in bed next to her, right? Great setup, great payoff. Now, the problem that it has, which so many short horror films have, it has the obligatory jump scare ending, which I hate. Like, that moment of her realizing somebody is in bed with her and it's not her husband is the end of that story.
Yeah,
we don't need a creepy face hiding under the blankets and a jump scare with like a musical sting. But so many of these great short horror film setups feel obliged to include that jump scare. And I'm really curious, if you made some of these short horror films without the jump scare, are they as effective? Do they get as much play? Because like Bedfellows has gotten like 27 million views or some crazy amount, right?
Wow.
Does it still work without that jump scare? I feel like it would, but you see so few of them without it that I don't know.
But was it the first to do that? Like of the shorts? Like
no,
how old is
it's
it?
one of the first ones that I saw, but I'm sure it's not one of the first ones that was made. All the things I love about short horror films are present in the early setup, which is creating a scene that you have the expectation you understand what's happening. Two people in bed together. It says it's 3 a.m. The clock says it's 3 a.m. There's a picture of a husband and wife. Like it, all the signals to your brain. You know what this is. This is a domestic bedroom scene late at night, right? Yeah. And then the horror comes out of the subversion of that. It has all of those things, which I think all the best short horror films do something simple like that.
I think so. For me, what would have been more interesting to me than the monster is if, like, cut to the whole thing happens the way it happens, and she's reaching over to pull the thing off, but you don't see the guy's face, and the camera comes down, and you see like big muddy boots on you know, like on the thing or something like that, and then it's over. Then it cuts it over. That you don't need the monster or the scare or anything like that. You want to,
and the monster just it feels so disconnected from what's happening too.
Yeah.
It feels like a different piece. It feels like you're, you know, and it didn't like, even what the husband saying, I think he says I got locked out, right? I forgot my keys. I had to go for a walk and I got locked out and I forgot my keys. But it would be good if somehow his reason or what he did was connected to the person that's in there, or the person waited for him to go, or that's why the muddy boots would be scarier, like someone was watching them and went in. It just feels like he randomly went in and forgot his key. Like the disconnect between the monster and the clever storytelling beforehand, I found didn't quite match. And then the long time it just sits on the face.
So I don't think you need to connect the things. I think the horror is strictly I am in bed with somebody. I think I know who that person is. And then I suddenly realize that the person I think is sleeping next to me is not sleeping next to me.
To me, I concur with that piece of it. That works. That's the horror. I agree.
And to me, it doesn't need an explanation beyond that.
Once you add a monster, though, it creates a second horror.
Yeah, that's the problem with the monster.
I'm just talking about the monster.
Yeah, and that's the problem with the monster.
It's like two horrors. It's like the horror, the setup is the horror, and then the monster is a completely different horror that's disconnected from what you were pitching is what works.
Exactly. And I think so. And I watch all these short horror films, so I still love them, and I've gotten so tired of the obligatory jump scare ending that some of these, once I realize what the payoff is, I actually stop because I'm like, I know the monster's going to jump out. I already know about that. But another one that's like that is a great setup with an obligatory jump scare ending, which is very annoying, is Lights Out. Probably the most famous of these because they actually made a full length movie out of it. Right. But the original short, which is only a couple of minutes long, is incredibly effective in the setup, which is, woman getting ready to go to bed, lights on in the hallway outside of her bedroom. She turns the light out in that hallway, and there is a shadowy figure standing in the hall. Then she turns the light back on, and the shadowy figure is gone. What an awesome setup. What an awesome visual setup. And watching her, the escalating set, because then she hears she closes the door and she hears footsteps in the hallway. And her realization that the thing can't appear if the lights are on, watching her struggle to keep the lights on so that the monster can't get her. And then that moment when the lights go out and she can't get them to come back on. That to me is the entire movie. You're done.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have the obligatory jump scare ending where like, oh, creepy face outside the blankets. Right. Why do we need that? Like, short horror filmmakers, stop doing that. Like, it's so much creepier when you don't include that.
I think another thing with Bedfellows that could have been, I think, more effective, because he calls, the husband calls and says he's locked out or whatever. To me, the fear dissipates a little bit because he's there. And even though he's locked out or whatever, he's there. But if he would have called and said, hey, I'm still out with the boys, like it's going to, this is where they party and it's not going to be a while. Then all of a sudden she's like, who the fuck is in this bed? And she's alone, right? Yep. She's alone in this thing. And then you cut to and you see, so that's a scary thing. Still Lights Out. One of the problems I had with Lights Out is, and I know this is like what people say of all horror films, but I know you say this a lot too, Ty, is like if it's something that you wouldn't do, it doesn't scare you. So my thing is the logic behind. She turns it off. There's this shadowy figure that shows up. She turns the light on. She turns it off. You would be fucking gone. Like she goes to bed. She sees that and she's like, oh, this is scary. I'm going to tape the monster. I'm going to tape the light on so the fucking monster won't come back while I'm catching some shut eye over here. Like I'm getting the fuck out. Assholes and elbows. All that monster's going to see.
Well, there's an answer to that they don't do. But here's the thing: is these short horror films. They're shot on a shoestring budget. You know, they clearly don't spend a ton of time developing the script, right? And I get it. It's a 2-minute script. I get it. You're not going to spend days and days polishing a 2-minute script, right? But maybe they should a little bit, because the answer to that is if she looks outside and everywhere outside it's dark, right? And she's saying, if I go outside, I will be murdered because it's dark out there. And she locks the door. Yeah. She keeps the lights on, and it's not that she's going to sleep. It's that she feels like she is in a refuge of light, right? And everything else is dark. Then I understand. That makes complete sense to me. That's just a slight tweak of what's doing. You know, that open some curtains, look outside, see that it's dark out there, and go, shit, I can't go out there because the dark monster can get me out there, right? Then I understand what's going on. But you're right. Yeah, you're not going to go to sleep with that fucking monster in your hallway.
No, but one of the things that I enjoy about this, and you were talking about they didn't do a lot, like a lot of thought and development. One of the things that I enjoy about doing this is you're taking a single unit of storytelling. You're taking a single block. You're taking a sequence. You're taking a beat, and then you're dissecting why it works and why it doesn't work. And so for you, they might be limited budget, but you can take, the budget doesn't affect the idea, so her like taking away her options of leaving because it's all dark. You can do that with the same budget and same amount of time that they had with what they had then. So for me, from a perspective, I like to think about something like Still Life, where I'm like, well, that was, and then there's some things you watch like, oh, it would have been better if.
Well, it could have been better if. I find that in many visual storytelling forms, which movies, TV, less so, but things like video games and short films and stuff like that, the writing is an afterthought. It's often the least developed part of what they're doing. And that's the mistake that you make, because what I keep telling like these game studios and that kind of stuff is writing is the cheapest part of your process. Spend some time, spend some money on the writing. It's way less expensive than anything else you're doing. And bad writing can kill a good project, and good writing can elevate a mediocre project. So like Still Life, you're saying the directing, you didn't love the directing so much, but the story's so well developed. You love it anyway.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The story and the execution of the storytelling, even though I don't love the direction of it, like the story, it's not only is the story interesting, they knew what pieces they needed to tell it properly and how to edit it and pace it. And even though the music feels very Twilight Zone-y, it worked too. It came together, the pieces. Yeah, for what it was on Lights Out, like to me, the switch moment was the whole movie. After the switch, hiding under the bed and none of that, and then the scare beat, and the kind of her getting to the plug, I think, none of that quite connected the way the switch. It was almost like they had this great idea of the switch, which I would have done slightly different. I would have, each time I turned it on, it got closer. So it was like, the first time she does it, she doesn't see it. We see it. It's way in the back. Then maybe you can do that a couple times. She's in the bathroom. It's there. Then she does it. Wait, did I see something? It's there. She turns off. It's a little bit closer. What the fuck? She turns it off. On. It's a little closer. Turns it off. On. It's gone. Like you could play with you could play that beat. You could really milk that beat. Because then from there, like the plug, and I didn't understand why she was hiding under the covers. Was it light? Was it supposed to be light under there? Or was she just scared?
No. It's supposed to be that she's scared. But Wes is right that the thing that knocks me out of a horror moment more than any others, and I think most people are like this, is when somebody's doing something so dumb that you're like, well, they deserve to be killed. And I actually, I've talked about this in other venues before, that like when I'm watching a horror film and it is stupid, incompetent people being murdered because they are stupid and incompetent, like all the horror and frighteningness of it goes away. Like I just don't care anymore.
You're like, good.
When it's smart, competent people being killed in spite of the fact that they're making smart decisions, then it's terrifying because then you see yourself. Sure. You're going, oh shit, she did what I would have done, and she's still going to get murdered. That's much more frightening. But that's taking some time with the idea. It's taking some time with the writing and developing the story so that you can get that. The easiest version of a horror movie, you know, and like I watched all the Friday 13th movies just like everybody else, but that's the easiest version, which is stupid teenagers get murdered because they're stupid teenagers. And the only creativity in it is, oh, hey, he jammed this one with a pitchfork, but that one he like split in half with a machete. Like that's the only creativity is in the execution of the murders. Those are not scary. There's nothing scary about those movies.
No, they're gross.
I think the reason that the Terminator works so well, because I consider that like that has a horror element to me in that movie. But one of the reasons it works so well is Kyle Reese is so goddamn competent. He's so good at what he does, and he's facing something that is pushing him to the very limits, and even past the limits of what he's humanly capable of. And that struggle going through the whole story is like what puts you on, because you're like, not only is he doing things that you wouldn't have thought of, he's doing things that you couldn't have, you didn't have the, like, I can't make a pipe bomb like that. You know what I'm saying? And shit like that. Like he's like got like this whole thing. And so when something like that, so in the inverse of what you're saying, Ty, is that if somebody's extremely competent and they know how to defend it, that pulls me in so much more. And that's I mean, so much more interesting to me.
Part of what makes Alien so engaging when you're watching it is the people, the crew, they sit around and they have intelligent conversations about what to do.
Yeah.
Right? They sit and they talk to each other and they're like, we could try this or we could try that. And they're being smart. And when they get caught off guard, it's because it's impossible to know how quickly and this thing is becoming deadly. That's outside of human expectation. So you understand why when they first see it, it's the size of Jones the cat. And so let's just go find it and we'll bag it. Humans don't expect something to go from cat size to like 9 foot tall man size in the space of 24 hours. We just don't expect that to happen. And so we don't feel like they were stupid. We feel like we're there with them going, holy shit, it was the size of a cat. Now it's the size of like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. That's fucking terrifying, right? That I get. And I love that they keep, every time they are surprised by the monster, they have another conversation about it. And it's smart conversation. We can try this. We could try that. Maybe we could do this. They're trying not to get killed.
Sure. That's why I love The Thing so much. The Thing does the same thing.
Yep.
Like they discuss what to do. They're smart about it. They have keep no other choice.
Yep.
And it keeps evolving and there's no choice. There's no other place to go.
All right. So Wes, what's the next short horror film you want to talk about?
Mama.
Oh yeah, Mama. Which again got turned into a feature-length movie.
Yeah.
I didn't see the feature-length movie, but I know that it did. But this is one that I if you would have asked me after the fact, I said I think it could have legs going further, and I'll tell you why. Because for me, the most interesting part of Mama was the opening scene when the kid's backing up, and you know, and he falls down, and he goes, "Mama's here. We got to get out of here. We got to go." Da, da, da. And so it's so counterintuitive, to what movies have done in the past. This is Mama's here, and we got to get the fuck out of here. And the terror and the fear and them running. Yep. And to me, that was the most interesting part of it. When I saw Mama, like the first like Sixth Sense moment when it walks across the screen and saw, that was interesting. But to me, it got less interesting as the more I saw of the monster.
I agree.
Yeah,
I love.
But the first beginning had me on the ride.
The monster design.
Too, and I love that moment. Yep.
I was just going to say, the monster design is pretty unsettling.
Yeah.
Seeing it move is pretty unsettling. But you're right. It's that first moment.
The first time it's unsettling, and then the second it gets like, it almost looks a little silly. I love the moment where they say Mama's here and they go to leave and the girl picks up the fish. Right. It felt like there's something about that moment where I'm in good hands. I'm in the hands of a filmmaker who knows what they're doing, that they're building little character visual tools the way Spielberg might, in a horror movie. I want these girls. Not only do I want to live because they're little girls afraid of mom, she still has her innocence. She by going for that fish, and they were like, somehow that little detail really connected me to them. I like those little details are really important.
You know what that makes me think of, Breck, now that you mention it, is one of my favorite movies. It's not a perfect movie, so I'm not saying that, but it is one of my favorites. Did you ever see Dark City? Alex
yeah,
Price.
a long time ago. Yeah,
It
sure.
starts. It starts out with our main character who's lost his memory, waking up in a bathroom with water all over the floor, a full bathtub, and a fish flopping. And the first thing he does is pick up that fish and put it in the bathtub.
Right. Oh yeah.
And
it,
it says so much about who he is as a person that he takes the time to save the fish before he leaves the bathroom. That's one of those brilliant little moments. And it just reminded me, because you saying when she grabs the fishbowl and runs off with it, it says so much about who that girl is.
Yeah.
You know, and it's such a tiny moment.
And I'd like to bring up a point, because you talk about information, revealing a character through visual, through seeing her go grab the fish. Whereas like the Bedfellows, when I see the camera pan and you see they were a couple, they were this, to me, even though it was effective, and sometimes I enjoy this, whatever, but I think it's a lazier version of something when the girl turns back and gets the fish. Because I feel sure. emotional for what she did and how it's doing that. Sometimes going across the mantelpiece and you're telling the stories of the picture and the family, and that's giving you, I think it's effective, and I don't always like it, but sometimes it kind of, I've seen it so much, it kind of puts me off a little bit.
And you can only do so much in 90 seconds. So I get why they're doing the shorthand. Mama has a little more screen time to work with, so they could do some more stuff.
Yeah.
But
but
those little moments, those tiny little moments where you see a character do something without talking about it, that reveal character, reveal who they are as a person, what their intentions are, things that they care about. As a writer, what I pay attention to there is, because writers, we write dialogue, right? And so we're always looking for dialogue, and remembering that some of the most effective storytelling isn't dialogue is an important thing to keep in mind as a writer. When you're writing a scene and you're having somebody say something to reveal something about their character, having that moment where you sit there and go, or is there something I could show them doing that says the same thing and I can cut this line of dialogue?
Sure.
That it's a good exercise as a writer to always be
Wes
doing that mental
often
edit.
said, you often say that, Wes, on set. You're like, I don't need to say this line to sell this idea. I don't need this line.
Yeah.
I can sell this idea with a look or an action.
I would like to ask you guys if you can think of a good example of information or exposition or story being told visually, and it's done in a way that is creative and interesting, but true to the character, and it's honest, and it's not. And one example that I always think about, I think it was called Searching for Bobby Fischer. It's the chess, the kid.
A great movie.
Is that what? Oh, yes, fantastic.
Great movie.
But one of the things where I realized I'm in the hand of a great director is you got this kid who's a chess prodigy. Everybody's blowing everybody's minds and everything like that. And when the guy meets him for the chess instructor meets him for the first time, he goes in his room and he asks Bobby Fischer for something, and Bobby Fischer's shoes are untied. And the room is untidy, and he goes under the bed and he's digging he's underneath the bed and he's like knocking all kinds of toys and stuff. And you just to get something, he's unorganized, and you realize like he's just a kid. He's just a kid with this amazing ability. Whereas I think a lesser director would have had him like buttoned up and like a little, he would have been, his room would have been like all, but this kid, like it just showed him being a regular kid who just has this gift, this ability, which I thought was really interesting, and it makes you love him right away. Yeah. So now you're with him, whatever goes through.
Yeah, I'm going to mention this because I always mention it when we talk about chess, because I'm a total evangelist for this movie. But there is a movie from the 90s called Fresh. It's got Giancarlo Esposito.
I don't even know it.
Oh,
a few. I
watched that.
Did you? Okay, a few other.
You told me about it.
Samuel L. Jackson is in it. Yeah, you should watch this movie, Breck. It is a fucking fantastic movie. But almost everything you know about Fresh, the character Fresh, is told visually. He says he's the main character, and he says fewer lines of dialogue than almost anyone else in the movie. He's a quiet kid moving through a very dangerous world, and almost everything he does is told visually. And it's brilliantly done. Like, you learn so much about him by just watching him and watching the little actions that he does. Tells you so much. But again, it's that same thing. It's that visual storytelling. Everybody else is talking to Fresh. Fresh doesn't talk a lot. He listens a lot. And then you see him do these little actions. You realize, oh, he heard what that guy said, and this is his response to it. But it's a thing he does visually. Yeah.
There's some really smart movie making. It's a well-written script, and I really enjoyed it. I will say it did, in my opinion, suffer a little bit if they would have had a stronger actor as actual Fresh. Because when he did, he just wasn't, he kind of took me out of it sometimes. But everybody else was really good.
You're bashing some 11-year-old? Nice, Wes.
Yeah, I am.
Kind of a dick.
I am.
He didn't want to. I can tell that.
Yeah, I really didn't want to, but I am because, if you find but what's his name? Esposito, John Carlos Esposito. Yeah. God, he was he's a star.
Yeah.
He was so charismatic. He was so intense. He was dangerous. He had all these things. He really makes that movie work.
Yep.
And I was unaware of, I remember him from Breaking Bad. This is thing, like he was dangerous. He was intense. He was kind.
This was a much earlier
charismatic
performance of his. Yeah. And he's a scary dude in that movie. But anyway, so Mama, again, it's with the short horror films, it's the mistake that it seems like we keep coming back to, that these keep making, that we keep coming back to, is feeling forced to jam the visual jump scare moment in, right? The audiences aren't going to like it unless they get a jump scare at the end. Mama doesn't quite do the jump scare, but it does do the thing where you're saying, where maybe we spend too much time looking at the monster.
Yeah.
Rather than letting the horror play out in the girl's reactions more than actually seeing the monster.
What I've learned through these horror shorts is I think I'm much more into psychological horror than I am in monster horror.
Yeah.
And I think the monster can work in tandem with the psycho, like Alien. Most interesting part for me and Mama, and I haven't seen the movie, was when they're like, Mama's here, we gotta get the fuck out of here. Yeah. And then they get the thing and everything. That's when I was really caught up in it.
And the great monster movies, Jaws, Alien, movies like that, what you invariably read when you read the production log of these movies and the backstory behind them is they shot a shit ton of monster stuff that they cut out of the movie, right? I mean, Jaws is what it is because they cut 90% of the shark scenes out of the movie. Alien, they shot a whole lot of the alien walking around in the ship and doing stuff, and they realized it didn't work. It just looked like a dude walking around in a rubber suit. So they cut almost all of it out of the movie. So we only see the alien in brief little snippets. And because of that, it remains terrifying. So as if I was going to make a monster movie, those lessons are in my head. Cut it down to the minimum amount of showing the monster you can possibly show and still tell your story.
But the other thing with the monster and why it works with Mama a little bit is that there's some mythology behind the monster. Mama's here. So there's something and they're terrified of it, and they obviously live in this place, and they're trying to get out, and so there's a desire to know what Mama is, right? Yeah. What is it? So you do, in that first shot, you do want to see something. Yep. But in the other shorts that we've looked at, they're just jumps. There's no setup like the one with the people in bed. There's no mythology behind the creature. It's just a scary face, so it means nothing. And there's no anticipation of it.
All right. So what other ones do we want to talk about?
All right. This is the last one. Don't Peek.
Which one was Don't Peek again?
Remind me. I know I've seen it. Remind me which one it is.
It's the one she's playing a game.
On the video game, the Nintendo Switch.
Oh, the video game. Yeah, the Switch. I didn't fully understand this one. Did you guys? She was doing things on the.
Well, her room was the actual room on the game. And so she turning off the lights and then there was the creature at the door that wanted to be let in. It was kind of, I liked the idea that she could see the creature on the screen and not in the door. There's kind of something interesting about it, ish, I guess. But then it fell to the same thing where the monster was there and it was in the bed. All these are so many in the bed. It was another one it's rising under the bed and then it's there and attacks at.
That idea gets used quite a lot in short horror films. I think because it's easy to do, it's easy to produce, where you can't see the monster, but when you look through your iPhone, you can see it, or that kind of idea. I think the most effective of those, and I can't remember the name of the short film it's in, but it was one I saw quite a while back. But a guy gets a video game that's supposed to be like the hardest video game ever, and he's playing it, and basically it's just you're this little character in a maze, and this horrible monster is coming after you, and you're trying to escape. And so he's running, and he jumps to the door, and then the monster catches him and kills him, right? So he's like, oh, and then he tries it again, and he immediately gets killed and so he's getting frustrated. And the idea is that if you lose this game 3 times, the game is over, right? And so he's trying really hard on the 3rd try, and the monster still catches him and kills him. And then, of course, the reveal is he puts the computer down, and the monster's there in the room with them. Like the thing that looks like the thing from the game.
What I mean,
so that idea, I think that idea gets recycled a lot.
Yeah.
So Breck, I didn't know. I guess I didn't. I was watching it, trying to hurry up before this, so I didn't know. I actually think that's actually kind of a cool idea. I think it would have been like she's playing a game and she realizes that she's in the room of the game. Yeah. I think it would have been more interesting if she's playing the game and there was a consequence for the character that was playing, and something that she was doing immoral with this character or something like that. And then she realizes, that she's in the room, that she's in a character, and that somebody's playing that character too. So she's going to have to go through the consequences or something like that.
I think one of the fun things, at least with the designs of this short, is that it's the most innocuous, gentle game that she's playing. Like one of these games that like a 5-year-old would play, where you make the bed, you clean up your drawer, you're like a little character that I can't remember, like Animal Crossings or one of these like really sweet games. And so it's the juxtaposition of the most, as opposed to a game where there's a monster already in the game, or you're shooting people, or it's an escapist, gentle game that then has this like kind of terrifying creature living within it. So I think it was kind of the point was that juxtaposition a bit. It didn't quite work. It just like it didn't quite work for me. I mean, interesting idea, but again, and then mixing like this tendency to mix. We see it one way, but then we only hear it, but then we only see the results of it stepping. It's like mixing all these different conceits together as opposed to sticking to like one idea. It's like every like cost saving conceit comes together at the same point.
Ty, but I think you made a very good point. For me, it's always story. And when I learned that is, the fact that I watch every year all the Twilight Zones, right? And then I go back to the 1950s Twilight Zones, 1960s, and they're terrible sound quality, terrible visual effects, like the way they're shot and everything like that. But I watch them over and over and over because the stories are great and they're interesting and compelling and things like that. And I can watch something that is shiny and the best shot and special effects and all that stuff, and I could just not care. And so then that really makes me realize what's most important.
I was going to say, and I agree with that thesis mostly, but sometimes when I watch Twilight Zone and it's, they started on film and then they got cheap and they went to that shitty like tube video, and it looks like a soap opera. Like I find it harder to get into the Twilight Zone episodes that were shot later on the cheap on video versus the film ones. Like I like, even though I completely agree with your thesis about like the content is more than the important than how it's created. Like I find that barrier of entry really hard to overcome sometimes.
I agree with you, Wes, that story for me is the most important thing. But to your point, Breck, that is something that I find a little troublesome. And everybody gets to like what they like. So I'm not lecturing anybody for liking the things that they like, but the current modern audiences are so spoiled with this sort of incredibly high fidelity of graphics and visual effects and all that stuff that I think to some degree it's less about stories and more about just having photons blasted at your eyes for 2 hours, where you walk out of the theater and 5 minutes later you can't even remember what the story was. You just remember that big robots punched each other. The problem with that, I think, is sometimes really, really interesting ideas and really interesting stories that are told in a more subdued fashion get ignored because they don't look like the thing that, they don't
Sure.
look like the latest Michael Bay version. They look like this other slightly less modern version. And I think a lot of really great stuff gets missed because of that. I'll tell people, like, some of the best sci-fi stories I remember as a kid, the things that really affected my storytelling sense were the old Outer Limits episodes.
Sure.
Which often pales in comparison to Twilight Zone because they were kind of around the same time and Twilight Zone was much more popular. But some of those Outer Limits episodes had fantastic little 40-minute stories. And people watch them, and it's clunky props and clunky visual effects. Obviously there were no visual effects, so it's clunky props and, weird special effects and that kind of stuff. And people are like, oh, I can't watch that because it looks cheap and it looks fake. And, I'm a gamer, and the same thing happens where I'll tell people, oh, this was a fantastic game. And they're like, oh, the graphics in that game aren't good. I'm like, yes, but the storytelling is amazing. And all of that stuff is amazing. And they're like, yeah, but I don't like anything that doesn't have good graphics. I think people really miss out on some of the great storytelling that has happened in these various media because they're so hung up on it has to be this shiny, Michael Bay visual effects or it doesn't count, which is too bad, I think.
Yeah, and I'll just add, and Breck, I know you're getting short on time, but I'll add that before this podcast, I don't think we're talking on the air. I was talking about how I showed my kids Alien, and they were just E.T., and they were just transfixed, like big difference. But how, like, the storytelling of E.T., and now this is a movie that's 30 years old, and they're sitting there and they're captivated by it. And I also showed him, which I thought was a decent movie, is the new Ryan Reynolds movie on Netflix,
Adam Project.
The Adam Project. So I watched the Adam Project, which is Spielbergian. Like, I mean, that is like, it is taken out of E.T. It is taken out of, it is trying to hit that moment of E.T. And my kids, like, once you get to the midpoint of the second act, they just tune out.
Wow.
They just tune out. And it's flashy and spaceships and great, these fight sequences.
I agree with your kids.
Eloquent.
I found that movie very boring. So I'm with your kids on that one.
And I watched that and I'm like, this is a kid's perspective. And it has all the bells and whistles and everything that these other movies don't have. That is, decent acting and all this stuff. And why does E.T. captivate them? Yeah. And still talked about 30 years later. And why does this not? And so it's trying to figure out, why is the magic in this and why is this not?
Yeah. And the E.T. creature, I mean, it's a puppet and they're pulling it with a string to make its feet move. I mean, it's like, it's as low tech filmmaking as you can get. And it's still captivating. Yep.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's not as good as Mac and Me, but it's good.
Well, Mac and Me is the gold standard.
No, E.T. is just a cheap ripoff of Mac and Me.
I think we can all agree on that.
Okay, we'll end with this question. I've asked this to both of you before, but we're going to do it in the horror genre. If that movie Yesterday, when he wakes up in a parallel universe and well, no, this is horror.
It's going to be the same answer.
This is in the horror genre. And you can't say Alien.
Okay.
You can't say Alien because I should have said that first. You can't say Alien because Alien would be all three of ours. But if you could wake up in the horror world and there was a movie not made that you can now make, what would that movie be?
In horror?
Yeah.
For me, The Thing.
The thing is a really good choice. You know what I would make? I would make The Haunting. I would make The Haunting. Is good. I think The Haunting is one of the great, creepy, understated, mostly visual storytelling horror movies. It doesn't get a lot of appreciation anymore. I mean, and I'm talking the 50s one. I'm not talking that shitty remake they did in the 2000s. I'm talking the original. I watched.
You wouldn't pick Event Horizon?
No, probably not. But the Haunting is a movie that I saw as a kid, and it still creeps me out when I watch it or think about it. Yeah.
One movie though, I would actually, I this actually could be strong for The Thing. Actually, the reason The Thing is, I think The Thing could be done today, and it could be so great. I mean, they tried to remake it, but it is sequel. But I think Firestarter. I think that because I think it's one of the most overlooked Stephen King's books, and I think it's one of my favorite of his books. And I think the movie could be so much
they already
better
made the perfect
than what
movie.
It was.
Firestarter's already the perfect movie. You can't do better than that.
Yeah,
George C. Scott is a one-eyed Native American. George C. Scott as a one-eyed Native American. Yeah. You cannot possibly be better than that.
Does Jaws count as a horror movie?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
it's the horror movie.
maybe that would be maybe I'd start there. I think my theory, I'd go Jaws.
You would try to do Jaws?
I'd go, well, if I could have one. Yeah, I'd go Jaws. I'd go The Thing, and then Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I think would be like my...
but you got to ask yourself, Breck, are you
I
big enough to wear Steven Spielberg's pants?
Can you make it?
I don't think you can make Steven Spielberg's pants, sir.
But do we get, the thing of that movie is it's not the script. And the script is great, but it was like everything is the execution.
I picked The Haunting because The Haunting is all about the script.
Yeah. And the thing about Jaws is like it's one of those kind of fluky magic things that happen with the right actors, the right kind of timing and everything like that. But I take like The Thing, if you take that story and you take that script, you can make something really compelling.
So you're not saying you get to just own everything in the execution. This is like you get the script and the idea, but you have to re-execute it.
Yeah.
Like you wake up tomorrow with the script.
Oh yeah. I would not take Jaws in that version.
It's greenlit.
I would definitely not take Jaws in that version.
No, my understanding of what you were saying is if it's the yesterday version, you wake up and you remember that movie, but nobody else does. You don't have the script in your head. You're gonna have to fucking rewrite it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like you can rewrite it. You know, the script that you sit down and you rewrite the script Jaws, which probably all of us could do, or rewrite Alien, which all of us could do. But what I think is interesting about this question is you really start to think about it because some of your favorite horror movies like Jaws, you're like, I don't know if that'd be my strike zone, you know, or like anything, you know what I'm saying? But I do look at Indiana Jones and be like, man, God damn, I'd love to be Indiana Jones.
Oh.
All right. Well, so for the audience, since we got to let Breck go, I guess what we need to know from the audience and in the, if you're on the Patreon Discord or if you're in the comments on YouTube or anywhere you want to send feedback to us, the thing we want to know is this the kind of stuff that you're interested in? Should we do more? There's 10,000 horror shorts out there. There's also sci-fi short films on YouTube, some of which are really interesting. If this is the kind of stuff you like people talking about, let us know. If it's not, let us know so that we can, never, ever, ever do this again. And
yeah. This was kind of experimental or whatever. Yeah. Despite our guest, hopefully.
Well, I think it makes sense because Breck has made a short sci-fi horror film, so he's right in the wheelhouse here, right?
That's where I started.
Yep.
This was fun, you guys.
Thank you guys for hanging out. Talk to you soon.
Anytime, I'm here.